Every human culture ever discovered, not most, not the majority, every single one, independently invented a belief in life after death. Cultures on opposite sides of the planet. No contact, no shared language, no shared religion, all of them. The question isn't why ancient people believed in an afterlife. The question is why your brain still does. The ancient Egyptians didn't just believe in an afterlife, they engineered it. They built a whole geography for the dead. Rivers, deserts, courtrooms, a great hall where your heart was weighed against a feather. 42 judges who reviewed every action of your life. A god named Osiris presiding over all of it, and a beast called Amit, part crocodile, part lion, part hippopotamus, waiting at the edge of the scales to eat the hearts that were too heavy to pass. They spent the equivalent of billions building infrastructure for the dead. The pyramids weren't monuments to vanity, they were preparation. But they weren't the only ones. The Sumerians, one of the oldest civilizations we've found, predating Egypt, built their own underworld, the land of no return. 7 gates, 7 guardians. At each gate, you surrendered one piece of clothing until you arrived naked and hungry, eating dust, drinking from stagnant pools. It wasn't pleasant, but it was somewhere. Now here's the thing. The Sumerians and the Egyptians built completely different afterlife architectures. Different gods, different rules, different geography, different moral logic, and they arrived at these systems independently. There's no evidence of direct exchange. But both concluded the same thing. After death, you are somewhere. Keep going. The Norse got Valhalla, a great hall of feasting and combat, where warriors chosen by Valkyries spent eternity preparing for one final war at the end of all things. The Aztecs mapped Mictlan across 9 separate levels, each one stranger than the last, each guarded by a different deity, a journey that took 4 years of the dead person's time to complete. The ancient Aboriginal Australians developed the dreaming, ancestors who never truly died. They became the land itself, the rivers, the rock formations, the red dirt under your feet. You weren't walking on ground, you were walking on them. The Lakota Sioux followed the Milky Way to the spirit world. The ancient Zoroastrians of Persia crossed the Chinvat bridge, the bridge of the Requitor, where your deeds were weighed before you stepped into paradise or fell into the abyss below. The ancient Japanese descended into Yomi, an underground realm of cold and hunger from which the dead could not easily return. Different continents, no contact, same answer. There is somewhere to go. The easy explanation is fear. Death is terrifying. The afterlife is comforting. People invented one to cope with the other. Makes sense. Problem solved. Except that explanation falls apart almost immediately. Because fear of death doesn't automatically produce an afterlife belief. It could produce nihilism, the conclusion that nothing matters because everything ends. It could produce complete denial. It could produce 100 different responses. But it keeps producing this specific belief. In cultures that never met, in people who disagreed on everything else, on gods, on law, on what lightning meant, on how to bury the living and honor the dead. They agreed on this. Which means the question isn't why they were afraid. The question is what it is about the specific architecture of the human mind that keeps generating the same answer, regardless of where you were born, what language you spoke, or what anyone told you. Paul Bloom, a psychologist at Yale, has been studying this for years. His argument is that the answer starts before any of us can speak. We are born as intuitive dualists. What that means. Before anyone teaches a child anything about religion, the soul, or what happens after death, children already naturally separate the mind from the body. The body is the machine. The mind is the thing that runs it, something that feels like it exists on its own terms. Bloom tested this with children who had no formal religious instruction about death. When he asked what happens when you die, not what happens to the body, but what happens to you, The children almost universally said, "You keep going. You can't hear anymore. Your eyes stop working. Your body goes cold. But you still know things. You still feel things. You still want things. Not because someone explained it to them, because it is the default setting. And if children arrive at this before adults have a chance to teach them anything, if this is where the unformed mind lands on its own, then it isn't a cultural product. It's something that comes with the hardware. Jesse Bering, then at Cornell, tested this more precisely in 2002. He told children a story about a mouse, a perfectly healthy mouse. The mouse met an alligator. The alligator ate the mouse. The mouse was dead. When Bering asked about the mouse's body, whether its ears still worked, whether it could feel hunger, whether its eyes still saw, the children understood perfectly. Biology ends, the body stops. They got it. But when he asked about the mouse's beliefs, what it knew, what it hoped for, what it wanted to happen next, the children said those things were still there. The dead mouse, inside the alligator, still had knowledge, still had desires, still had hope. The younger the child, the stronger the intuition. And here's the part that should make you pause. Bering ran the same experiments with adults. Adults in secular, non-religious settings who had no strong afterlife belief, who would have told you with complete confidence that death is the end. The intuition was still firing, quieter, overridden by more rational processing, pushed down by what they'd learned to believe about themselves, but still there, still generating the same answer the children gave. Here's why, and this is where it gets genuinely strange. Your brain was not built to understand death. It was built to avoid it. Those are completely different engineering problems. One of the core tools your brain uses to survive is what researchers call hyperactive agent detection. You evolved in an environment where assuming there was something behind every movement, a predator, a threat, was far safer than assuming there wasn't. A rustle in the grass is probably nothing, but the human who assumed it was something survived more reliably than the one who didn't check. Pascal Boyer, an anthropologist at Washington University, calls this a hypersensitive agency detection device. We see agents everywhere, in the wind, in bad luck, in the way a door swings open at the exact moment you're thinking about someone. We generate intention where there is none, which means when someone dies, someone whose face you've run on a loop in your mind for years, someone whose voice you know, someone you could predict before they'd finish speaking, your brain does not simply stop generating them. It keeps going, keeps simulating them, keeps sensing their presence at the edge of a room. Because your brain was never designed to model absence. It was designed to track presence. And the dead in that system never fully leave. In 2019, a team at Bar-Ilan University, led by cognitive neuroscientist Yair Dor-Ziderman, published a study in Neuroimage that revealed something that should bother you more than it probably will. When humans attempt to genuinely imagine their own death, their own non-existence, the brain doesn't cooperate. It reassigns the thought, automatically, without asking you first. The brain tags the input as being about someone else. It cannot process itself as a non-entity. It cannot fully simulate its own absence. You can imagine your death from the outside. Your body, your funeral, the people standing over you, the silence you leave in the rooms you used to fill. But the observer is always there, the one noticing, the one watching, the one having the thought. You are never the gone. When you try to imagine being dead, you are always the one imagining. Which means your own non-existence is not simply frightening. It is literally unimaginable. Not as a metaphor, as a hard structural constraint in the architecture of your mind. You cannot think yourself out of existence. And so every time you try, your brain quietly concludes, there must be a somewhere. There must be something. There must be a you on the other side of this. Put all of this together, and the afterlife belief stops looking like a cultural invention. It looks like an output, a mind that separates self from body by default, a mind that keeps generating the dead as present because it was never built to process absence, a mind that sees intention and agency everywhere it looks, a mind that literally cannot simulate its own non-existence. Of course they believed, every single one of them. What else were they going to do? In 1986, three psychologists, Jeff Greenberg, Sheldon Solomon, and Tom Pieszczynski, published the foundational paper for what they called terror management theory. Their argument, awareness of mortality, is the deepest anxiety in human experience. And virtually everything humans build, culture, legacy, meaning, religion, love, art, law, children, is in some part a buffer against it, a way of saying, I was here. Something of me continues. I was not nothing. In their experiments, when people were reminded of their own death, when mortality was made salient, they clung harder to their beliefs, their culture, their group, the things that made them feel like part of something larger and more lasting than a single body. The afterlife, in this framework, is not a failure of reasoning, not a primitive mistake people hadn't thought through. It is the oldest, most widely distributed coping mechanism in the human archive, and it persists, not because people haven't thought hard enough about death, but because the mind that would have to do that thinking cannot fully go where that thinking leads. It hits a wall, and on the other side of the wall, it puts a door. Here's where it maps back to you. Every time you feel like your life should mean something, every time you can't fully accept that someone you loved is simply gone. Not somewhere, not anything, just gone. Every time you build something, make something, leave something behind because some part of you needs there to be a trace. That's not weakness. That is 30,000 years of humans pressing their hands against cave walls in the dark. That is every grandmother who ever sat beside someone dying and said, quietly, that it would be okay on the other side. That is a pharaoh who couldn't let go, pouring the wealth of a nation into stone because stone outlasts everything. You were not designed to accept oblivion. That might not be a flaw. It might be the oldest feature we have. The belief isn't the point. The reaching is. Reaching toward the ones who are gone. Reaching toward something that makes sense of all of this. Reaching, even now, even knowing what you know, across the gap between the living and the dead. That reaching is human. It always has been.